give them $100 down, and they wanted to get a loan on the house for 110% of the house value. And when she said, I'm not going to take that deal to my client, they came back and said, well, we'll put $3,000 down. And she said, okay, will you write all this down in clear text? And we'll take it to the mortgage company. And they went away. Mayo say Tom, not one of my favorite guys, but it's interesting to look at this atheist and see the similarities to our Christian beliefs and the way we treat people and so forth. The first one here, all actions are subject to command. You're responsible for what you say and do. Don't steal from the people. Be neither selfish nor unjust. Sounds like something called the golden rule almost. These are sort of humorous. These are like those are his 3 key points, and then these are the next follow-on, sort of spell it out a little more. Leave the door, replace the door when you leave the house. I guess that is a translation of close the door behind you kind of thing. Roll up the bedding on which you slept. Be courteous, be honest in your transactions, return what you borrow, replace what you break. The next one is sort of humorous. Do not bathe in the presence of the women. And then, do not without authority search those that you arrest. Okay, we talked about the email a little bit. What a great advertising way. You know, we all they're on the internet, utilize it, you know, for eBay, although I don't really like eBay, but they do a great job, I guess. And but Barnes and Noble and Amazon and those guys selling books, you know, what a great deal. When I was looking over this stuff, you can tell how my mind jumps around on stuff. I came across this, and I don't know what it had to do with anything, but I thought, you know, that's sort of neat. Mark Twain said he never let his schooling interfere with his education. And I thought, you know, that's sort of neat. I like that. One of the guys that's into the writing on this guerrilla marketing that I looked at was writing about this. He was fascinated with the fact not only are there more emails sent than snail mail, that doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to figure that out today, but what his interesting thing was that the U.S. Postal Service sends more emails within their service than they do of their own snail mail. And I thought that's sort of neat. So, it's a great time for guerrillas. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I don't think Marion, you know, thought when he went in the swamps to fight that it was doom and gloom. I thought he had a goal, and he successfully did it. And I think our businessmen, the ones that really care, are going to have goals, have action plans, and I think they're going to have fun and win as businessmen. And I think we all, if we're having fun, we're all going to be winners. So with that, I leave you. And for those that are leaving, a week ago we were riding over to Rotary at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he said, I may have a little bit of a problem because right now it's about a 10-hour presentation. This Thursday morning, he said, well, you'll be happy to know I got it down to an hour and a half. Do you think I ought to cut it some more? And we may come back and pick up that other 45 minutes because there's still 2 presenters for today that we haven't seen. But Judge Wright, Turbeville.
we were leaving home this morning, my wife Dorothy, always gives me some instructions. She doesn't want me to embarrass her. And she said, don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics. And don't cuss into an open mic. Well, I decided I can solve that problem. I do like George Summer, I just won't wear the mic. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate George and Carol getting me involved again in this interest in Revolutionary War history. I've pretty much neglected at AC since 1964. I was standing in Dr. Lewis Jones. Some of you historians know who Dr. Lewis Jones was. I was standing in Dr. Lewis Jones' office at Old Main in Waltham, at Waltham. And he said, an essential trait of a historian is that he can remember and recall what he observes and reads. And I thought about that a little bit, and I immediately walked across the hall and signed up for theology, where everybody's their own expert. So George and those have me back in history, though I'll tell you this, I am intimidated speaking in front of all these PhDs, and if there's a conflict between what I say and what they say, you believe what they say. You see, at law school, where is Dr. Slacker? At law school, I don't know whether it was this sort of rationalization or what, but we always believed that Francis Marion got drunk before we jumped out that window. And after hearing you yesterday, I went back last night and I looked, and sure enough, according to Weems and Davis, he jumped out the window so he wouldn't get drunk. But now I do believe, and Ms. Francis Marion will clear us up on this tonight, but I do believe that he would sip a little rum back in the trunks. I started to do a PowerPoint presentation for you today. I didn't do it. There are 3 reasons I didn't do it. One is I was afraid it would work like George did yesterday. The second reason was that I did all the research I could, Dr. Stoops, and I could not find in any of my research where any revolutionary period lawyer had access to PowerPoint. So I decided I would try to make a genuine revolutionary presentation using this old yellow paper. And then, of course, the third reason I decided not to do it is I don't have to. Well, let's talk about lawyers and the revolution a little bit. The attitude towards lawyers apparently has not changed tremendously in the history of this country. Lawrence M. Friedman, in his book, A History of the American Law, reports that the early colonial years were not friendly years for lawyers. Reminds me of how many lawyers we got? I know we got one from Florida. We've got 2 lawyers. So I guess we'll just be the butt of the jokes today. Reminds me, I read the little reference one place where it said that 99% of the lawyers give the rest of us a bad name. And some of you have heard me tell this story before. These 2 fellows, they were historians, and like to go out in the cemetery and read tombstones. And they also like to sip a little rum. And so late one Saturday afternoon, they were walking through the tombstones and sipping rum, and one of them, old Henry, looked at his dress and said, "Here lies a lawyer and an honest man." And he turned around and he said, "John," he said, "come over here. They buried 2 people in this race." That's, during colonial times, lawyers were confronted with the hostility, I say the same hostility that some of us are confronted with today. In fact, in South Carolina, under our early Continental Constitution, it was considered a base and vile thing to plead for money or reward. And as far as I can tell, the first professional lawyer in South Carolina was Nicholas Trott, who came here while we were still under proprietary government as the Attorney General in 1699. And of course, he pretty much dominated things until the Revolution of 1719, when the proprietary government went out and the Crown government came in. And at that point in time, the Crown began to send lawyers over here to assist them. Now, what I want us to try to catch hold of, one point today that I want us to try to get, is the relationship between the training which the early lawyers got and the ideology that supported or backed up the American Revolution. Lawyers were among the educated people in society. And then as now, if something looked bad, you blame the lawyers. Thomas Gage, writing in Boston in 1765, said, "The lawyers are the source from which the clamors have flowed in every province." And that same sentiment was expressed in Parliament. That the real problem we had in the colonies was that the lawyers were stirring up things. But yet, when you look at the legal profession, when you look at the nature of the law, a lawyer as a revolutionist is sort of a strange concept, because lawyers sort of generally, as a class, are some of the most conservative people in society. We place great priority or great weight on precedent, on what's happened in the past, and we place great weight and pay great tribute to our present institutions. And I think in order to understand the real importance that lawyers had in the Revolution, we don't need to review all of the events leading up to the Revolution, but we do need to recognize what was going on in England. Change was taking place in England. At the end of the French and Indian War, you remember the British instituted instituted a policy of closer supervision and control over the colonies in North America. And as a part of this policy of closer supervision and control, it included the fact that they thought the colonies should bear some of the burden of the cost of the administration of the colonies, bear some of the cost of maintaining the troops in the colonies, and also offset some of the debt from the French and Indian War. Now, prior to that time, prior to 1764, as far as I can tell, Great Britain had a policy of sort of, use the word, I'm not the only one here old enough to remember Spiro Agnew, but to use the words of Spiro Agnew, Great Britain had a policy of sort of benign neglect toward the colonies. There were rules of regulation, but they weren't as strict about enforcing them. And during that period of time, the colonies developed nearly an independent attitude, an independent political and economic system.
Could you hold for 1 minute while I change the tape? Thank you. Sorry about that.
I need to get the correct as this change attitude in Great Britain towards the supervision and control of the American colonies took place, then conflict arose. Because prior to that time, the colonies had moved towards developing a more independent attitude. Some of the colonies had acted to place more power in the lower assembly, less power with the royal government, and less power with the upper chambers. And so the educated colonists, and my apologies to everybody here other than the lawyers, the educated colonists, most of whom were lawyers, mounted an ideological attack on these new British policies. And there were primarily three sources, I believe, of the ideological attack that was mounted against these new British policies. And the first source was the common law itself. Because, put succinctly, the common law is that body of old English law and regulations that is designed to protect the king's subjects against arbitrary acts. And if you read and study, you find that often the complaint against the Parliament, or the complaint against the king, was that certain things, acts they were taking were arbitrary. That came out of the common law that English subjects should be protected from those kinds of arbitrary acts, and the lawyers, going back to the idea that lawyers are more conservative, the lawyers were slower to come around to the idea of independence. But at the same time, the lawyers were insisting that the colonists in America should have the same rights and protections as afforded to those citizens who live in England. So this was part of that ideological conflict. The rights of the settlers and the colonists to have and enjoy the same rights and privileges that citizens in England enjoy. Now, a second source of the ideological resistance, I think, was the Age of Light that was taking place in Europe. The idea where people looked to reason and began to question the past. And this idea, to a great extent, was tied to the philosophy of John Locke, the 17th century English philosopher. And in talking about his philosophy, you're going to hear some phrases that you would hear coming up over and over during the Revolution. Because John Locke believed that all individuals possessed certain natural rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit, we say pursuit of happiness, but what did Locke say? Locke said, and the pursuit of property. Yeah. And he believed that it was the responsibility of government to protect those rights. And the lawyers who were educated in London and the tutors who came from England to tutor the children of the wealthier families in the colonies brought that philosophy of enlightenment with them. And briefly, a third ideological source, I think, for the American Revolution, or the resistance, was what was going on in England itself, the English political tradition. Because that was a point in time after the Stuart Kings where there was the movement in England to limit the authority of the crown and increase the power of Parliament. These ideals, as I indicated earlier, were adopted by many colonial assemblies who forced powerful, or who faced powerful royal governors. And in many of the colonies, in most of the colonies, the lower assemblies assumed more power. So, we get to 1764. Colonies believed that Great Britain should be responsible for external matters. They believed that their own local assemblies should be responsible for internal matters. And Great Britain begins to enact the Stamp Act, the Declaratory Act. We don't have time to go over all these acts, but the acts that Great Britain enacted were ones to clearly send the message to the colonies that Parliament had power, not only to tax, but power to legislate in the colonies. One of the sources I read said that we often think that the Revolution was about the power of tax, but it was really deeper than that. It was more than that. The Revolution was about the power to legislate. Who was going to legislate? And who was going to govern? And so the lawyers led in this ideological revolution. Now I'm going to do two more things, and as I cut down my 10-hour presentation. One is I'm going to talk a little bit about the training that the lawyers got. And then after I talk a little bit about the training that the lawyers received, then I'm going to talk about two or three South Carolina lawyers and some of their contributions to the revolution. And don't worry, because I do my presentations like I do my sermons. When I preach, I always have 3 or 4 building stopping points. And when Dorothy raises her hand and starts whipping hitting on the watch at the back of the church, I know it's time to stop. So I'll be able to stop at the appropriate time. But in colonial times, we didn't have law schools in the colonies. The road to the bar was primarily through clerkship and apprenticeship. Lawyers learned to practice law by reading the law. As I indicated to you earlier, in the early 18th century, after the Crown took over the government, they exported lawyers to assist in the government in this country, and we learned some from them. But in the 18th century, the more affluent families in America sent their sons, sorry ladies, that's what it was. More affluent families sent their sons back to London, to the Inns of Court, to be educated in the law. And that's, and that's why this little first part of the presentation that I made about the ideological basis of resistance, that's where that ties in, because these lawyers who went over there to be trained in the law were exposed to those ideas. Now, the Inns of Court were not like law schools as we think about it. In fact, if law school, when I was there, had been like an Inn of Court, I don't know what that'd make. Because in the Inns of Court, it was really like an independent state. It was like an eating and a living club. And they sent these sons over there, and they lived there. They read the law on their own. They went to court and observed court. And then after 4 or 5 years of reading the law on their own, observing court, and discussing court in these little clubs, they would be admitted to the bar. So it took some self-discipline, and it didn't work for everybody. Peter Manigault, who was a member of one of the famous Charleston families, went to the Middle Temple and studied law. And he wrote home, and what he asked his parents was to send a little Madeira wine and some rum so that he could entertain with proper Southern hospitality. That was his concern. John Lawrence, we're going to talk to John Lawrence, the son of Henry Lawrence. John Lawrence, when he was over there, consistently wrote home for more money. I mean, it sounds very much like kids in school today. You write home for more money, and Henry Lawrence complained about it, but like some of us today at AC, he always sent the money. He said, we've raised this generation of children. I'm sorry, that, you got to quit spending so much money, but here's the checkbook. And that's sort of how Henry Lawrence treated John Lawrence. Now, it wasn't all told that Edward Rutledge and Thomas Haywood, two other South Carolinians at the ends of the court, wrote home and told their parents about eating at the table with the great William Blackstone as he celebrated the publication of his full-volume work on the commentary on the laws of England. Parents were very concerned about sending their children over there, especially to England. They were concerned about immorality. This little book, Holland and Scottsdale, is called Middle Temple Lawyers and the American Revolution. They say, and I'll just quote this a little bit from them, the hazards were pretty much the same as for students everywhere. Women, alcohol, smoking, gambling, idleness, and diversions to and at the theaters and pleasure gardens. William Franklin from Pennsylvania, who was son of Benjamin Franklin, and John Lawrence from South Carolina, son of Henry Lawrence, both fathered a child while at the inn. Lawrence married the mother of the child he fathered, though he never brought her here with him. Franklin didn't marry the mother of the child. Soon after he fathered the child, he came on back to New Jersey and was appointed royal governor of New Jersey. It's sort of an aside, and this is sort of speculation, that Franklin named his son William Temple Franklin. And many people speculate that that may well mean that the child was conceived in the temple. So I mean, they were studying law, but they were having a good time too, I guess. This is sort of an aside as well, because we're not talking about Benjamin Franklin and Franklin's, but you know, William Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's son, who was trained at the Middle Temple, remained a lawyer, and that almost drove Benjamin Franklin crazy. The one consolation that Benjamin Franklin had was that he did get the grandson who was conceived in the temple. He got him over here under his control, and he of course sided with his grandfather as a patron. South Carolina, since '64, young men to the Middle Temple for training in the law during this period of time. And the colonies that sent their children down, South Carolina sent boats, followed by Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And again, Stockdale and Holland sort of trying to just point out the significance of this training in the Middle Temple. They say of the Middle Temple signers, of the 12 Middle Temple signers of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, 7 were from South Carolina. 2 Middle Temple aides to George Washington. 1, John Lawrence, was from South Carolina, and we'll probably talk about him in a few minutes. 4 of the 5 Middle Templars sent as ambassadors to Europe by the young republic were from South Carolina. So South Carolina not only played an revolution here in the campaign in the South. But South Carolina played an important role in the development of the nation, as well as in leading in the ideological resistance that led